The wealthy don't sell their assets. They borrow against them. I'm sure you've heard this often repeated piece of advice, and it is true. Now though, it's being applied to ordinary Bitcoiners. Never sell your sats. Borrow against them instead. Avoid capital gains taxes. Keep your stack intact. Honestly, it does sound like the perfect plan. But there's a problem with this. The version of this strategy being marketed to ordinary people is a pale imitation of the real thing. And if you don't understand why, you could lose everything you've worked so hard to accumulate. So I'm going to break down exactly why borrowing against your Bitcoin is not the same as what wealthy people do. And by the end of this video, you will know exactly what question to ask yourself before you even consider it. First of all, I'm going to establish what I mean when I say wealthy. We are way past the days when being a millionaire was considered wealthy. I am talking about the top 1% of people here. In the US, just to enter this bracket, you need about $15 million net worth, the kind of wealth that means you shouldn't ever need to work for money again. But before I go any further, I want to take a moment to share with you the ways that you can support my work. Right now, I'm 100% viewer supported. I receive zero ad revenue from YouTube because, well,
computer says no.
But I refuse to let that stop me from doing this work. So the best way that you, my viewers, can support me in 2026 is to subscribe to my Substack as either a free or paid subscriber. Most of my content goes there first. And to say thank you for your support, I am offering 25% off the regular price of an annual subscription exclusively for my YouTube viewers. My paid subscribers get access to my full archive, my subscriber chat, and all my Bitcoin deep dives. On top of that, you will get access to my Bitcoin Tool Vault, which contains both online and downloadable tools. There is a Substack link in the description and in the comments below. Thank you so much for your support, and I truly appreciate all my subscribers, with a special thanks to those who have already opted for a paid subscription. So now that I have that out of the way, let's carry on. So the first difference between a wealthy person and, well, you and I, is that when a wealthy person borrows against their assets, they borrow against a tiny portion of their wealth. This is probably the most important difference. So let's start here. When a wealthy family with 50 million in assets borrows 500,000 in cash, that loan represents 1% of their total net worth. 1%. If the market moves against them, they don't panic. They don't need emergency cash. Their lifestyle continues completely uninterrupted. They have buffers everywhere. Now compare that with an ordinary Bitcoin retail borrower. Let's say you have a net worth of 200,000, which is made up of home equity and Bitcoin. You own one Bitcoin, which is around $100,000 value when you decide to borrow. Maybe you borrow 30,000 against your one Bitcoin. The collateral that you used for that loan represents 50% of your net worth. Let me give you an example. John is 42 years old. He has saved $80,000 in Bitcoin. He needs to renovate his home, but he doesn't want to sell any of his stack. So he puts up all of his Bitcoin as collateral and takes out a $30,000 loan. His loan to value ratio is around 37%, which on the surface sounds pretty conservative. But then Bitcoin drops 40% over the next few months. John has already committed the cash to his contractors. He has no buffer. When the margin call comes, he can't top up his collateral. The lender liquidates his Bitcoin at the bottom to cover the loan. The wealthy borrower risked only a few percentage points of their total wealth. John just lost years of work and sacrifice. Yes, it is the same strategy, but it's a completely different risk profile. And the second point is this: the wealthy pay far lower interest rates than you or I. And this one cannot be overstated enough. Wealthy borrowers access money at a completely different cost than ordinary retail borrowers. They will have direct relationships with private banks. Their risk assessment is much lower. They can access interest rates nearer to the funding rate. They can get interest-only repayment terms. They can get custom credit lines with flexible schedules, and they are paying single instead of double-digit percentages in interest. When you can borrow at 4 to 5%, you only need your investments to grow slightly faster than that to come out ahead. It's a safer, more predictable, low-stress strategy. Now let's have a look at what ordinary borrowers might pay. So about 10 to 15% for Bitcoin-backed loans, 7 to 12% for home equity loans, 15 to 25% for unsecured credit. Borrowing at double-digit percentages requires exceptional returns just to break even. Plus, the interest burden is significantly higher for someone with a modest net worth and income. And yes, Bitcoin has returned well in excess of those rates in past years, but its volatility means the risk level at any given moment is unknown. It might jump 30%, it might drop 30%. When you have a fixed term loan, this does matter a lot. The wealthy borrow near wholesale interest rates. Ordinary people borrow at retail. The cost of money for the former is far lower than the latter. So the third way that the wealthy are different is with the type of collateral that they have access to. Think about what wealthy people might typically use as collateral when they borrow: real estate, bond portfolios, cash flow positive businesses, art collections, diversified stock portfolios. These assets don't have the same transparent 24/7 liquidity as Bitcoin. If you borrow against a property portfolio, you're not going to wake up one morning and discover that the value has dropped 25% with a margin call waiting in your inbox. Bitcoin is a different beast. It can fall 10% in a single day. It can fall 30% in a month. It can drop 70% in a bear market. And it can remain volatile for extended periods. Now, to be clear, volatility is not inherently risky for long-term holders. But for someone who needs their Bitcoin to hold a certain value as collateral, the volatility is risky. Lenders know this. They protect themselves aggressively. Liquidations and margin calls happen fast, often within 24 to 48 hours. So a wealthy borrower might take a $2 million loan against a $10 million apartment building. If the property market falls 10% over 18 months, the building is still worth $9 million. There is no risk of liquidation. A Bitcoin borrower takes a $50,000 loan when Bitcoin is at $100,000. 6 weeks later, Bitcoin is at $70,000. Because their loan-to-value ratio was high, they're suddenly underwater. Liquidation can hit whilst they're asleep. Wealthy borrowers use slow-moving assets, but Bitcoin borrowers have no choice but to use collateral that can spike wildly in either direction. So the fourth way that wealthy people are different is that when a wealthy borrower receives a margin call, they can respond immediately. They probably have cash reserves, stock portfolios, business revenue, access to multiple credit lines, and liquid assets spread across different accounts. They can add $100,000 in collateral without stress. But ordinary borrowers, they often have one savings account, one primary asset, one income source, minimal liquidity, and no backup credit facilities. When that margin call arrives, they might not be able to add collateral fast enough. They face liquidation forced selling, and permanent loss. Here's an example. Sarah, a wealthy investor, has $15 million net worth spread across 5 asset classes. She borrows $800,000 at 5%. When markets dip, she adds $100,000 in collateral from the sale of some shares. No problem. Mike, a Bitcoin-only saver, borrows $25,000 against his Bitcoin at 12%. When Bitcoin drops 25%, he gets a margin call. He has no extra cash. His Bitcoin is liquidated at the bottom. The wealthy can prepare for volatility in a way that ordinary borrowers cannot. So this fifth point, I think, is one that many don't understand or even consider. Wealthy families usually aren't dealing with their finances directly. They're not making all their own day-to-day financial decisions. They hire professionals to coordinate everything. Borrowing for wealthy families involves tax advisors, accountants, estate planners, financial planners, corporate structures, trusts, and family entities. Their loans are designed to reduce tax, protect assets, shield liability, provide liquidity, manage inheritance, and optimize long-term growth. Ordinary borrowers have to handle everything alone. They often end up relying on gut instinct, emotion, or just plain need. And they usually don't have expert advice warning them of the potential downside risks. A wealthy borrower might open a line of credit through a family trust, borrow against a diversified stock portfolio, and use interest-only payments to reduce taxable income. They have a law firm, an accountancy, and tax professionals coordinating and monitoring all of it. The average Bitcoin borrower might open a loan on their phone at 10 p.m. on a Friday night after watching a YouTube video titled "Borrow Against Your Bitcoin Like the Wealthy." There's an enormous difference between strategy and improvisation. The sixth point I want to make here is that wealthy families don't just borrow casually. Their advisors run extensive stress testing to make sure they can survive adverse conditions. They model scenarios like, what if the asset drops 30%? What if interest rates double? What if revenue slows? What if the loan can't be refinanced? What if a recession lasts 2 years? This creates resilience that ordinary borrowers simply don't have. Most ordinary borrowers look at today's conditions and assume tomorrow will be the same. A wealthy family office models a scenario where a large stock portfolio drops 30% and loan interest doubles to 8%. And based on that test, they ensure a loan can survive the worst case scenario. The retail Bitcoin borrower, on the other hand, optimistically assumes that Bitcoin will keep going up and take out a large loan at the top of the cycle. They have no buffer for downside volatility. Stress testing turns borrowing into a tool, while ignoring it turns it into a trap. And seventh on my list of reasons why the wealthy borrow differently is that they use borrowed cash to purchase assets that generate income. They are not borrowing to cover day-to-day expenses. They usually already have multiple income streams covering all of their living costs. They borrow to acquire commercial property, business equity, rental apartments, or to expand their companies. The debt is attached to future cash flow. Ordinary borrowers often borrow to cover lifestyle needs, holidays, cars, debt consolidation, home renovations, or just covering living expenses. When borrowing funds lifestyle, it's not working productively in the same way. A wealthy developer borrows $2 million to acquire a building that yields 8% net rental income. The loan pays for itself. An ordinary borrower takes $15,000 out against Bitcoin to upgrade their kitchen. Bitcoin drops, repayments become stressful. Their purchase doesn't generate any income. Borrowing only works well when the debt is productive. And my last point is this. Maybe it doesn't seem very fair, but Banks know wealthy clients can bring them good business for decades. The client relationship matters. They're willing to negotiate, extend terms, and work with them to find flexible solutions. Ordinary borrowers don't get any preferential treatment. They face automated margin calls, strict loan-to-value ratios, and of course, irreversible liquidations. Smart contract loans liquidate instantly, and traditional Bitcoin lending platforms will liquidate the moment your max loan-to-value ratio is breached. A wealthy borrower might see their collateral value fall sharply, but because the client is valuable, the bank is willing to work with them. A Bitcoin borrower sees Bitcoin fall 10% in a single day. Once they receive that margin call, they might have 24 to 48 hours before they are liquidated. No ifs or buts. The wealthy are extended flexibility, while ordinary borrowers must play by strict rules demanded by the lender. So, should you borrow against your Bitcoin at all? If you're going to borrow like the wealthy, I think you need to think like the wealthy first. Ask yourself these basic questions. Are you borrowing against a very small portion of your total net worth? Have you modeled what you believe could be a worst case scenario? What is the process for a margin call? How long will you have to top up? Do you have access to other assets or the means to add collateral if you receive a margin call? Are you using the borrowed money for something productive? What are the tax implications of being liquidated? Remember, you may owe capital gains tax because the asset has been sold. Can you achieve the same thing without risking your Bitcoin? Could you use savings, increase your income, or borrow against something that is less volatile? If your Bitcoin was liquidated, how far would you be set back? How long would it take to reach the same position again? And are you genuinely comfortable with the idea of potentially losing your collateral? Borrowing against your assets can be powerful when you have the buffers, liquidity, and professional support that wealthy families enjoy. It is far riskier when applied to the financial reality of the average person. The wealthy borrow because they have plenty of insulation from catastrophic failure. Ordinary people borrow and risk experiencing severe consequences directly. Understanding this difference protects you from financial decisions that sound smart on paper, but can carry hidden dangers that only become obvious after the fact. So borrowing isn't inherently bad, but copying strategies without the supporting structure can turn wealth building into wealth destruction very quickly. If you found this video helpful or thought-provoking, make sure you like and subscribe to my channel for more Bitcoin content designed to help you think clearly about financial self-sovereignty. And if you want to go deeper on this topic, check out the full article on my Substack. Remember, there is a link in the description and the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.